Korporatizam, kako ga vidi profesor Jeffrey Grupp, ne ispunjava samo težnju za profitom, već zadire u svaku poru života i u svoj biti predstavlja psihološku kategoriju, jer ljudima kroz korporativne medije nameće stav da korporativni sustav predstavlja najnaprednije društvo. Na primjer, da je normalno raditi 10 sati na dan u korporaciji i potom kupovati neprirodnu hranu punu umjetnih aditiva koju su proizvele korporacije u trgovačkim centrima koje pripadaju korporacijama. Na večer, taj homo sapiens, iscrpljen od rada za korporaciju, gleda korporativnu televiziju s političkim vijestima o potezima vlade čiji su članovi sad u vladi, a prije i poslije na čelu neke korporacije. Kad takav život drastično naruši zdravlje, čovjek odlazi po medicinsku pomoć da bi dobio skupe, neučinkovite i štetne lijekove korporacije. Korporatizam nije od jučer. 30. godina 20. stoljeća ta je ekonomska strana fašizma, koja se temeljila na spoju jake centralizirane nedemokratske vlade i velikih korporacija, bila vrlo popularna, a danas je u praksi prisutnija nego ikad. U knjizi Korporatizam profesor Jeffrey Grupp govori o porobljavanju i uništavanju ljudske svijesti od strane monopolističkih svjetskih korporacija koje kontroliraju sve resurse. Zemlju, rat, zdravlje, informacije, hranu, prijevoz, vodu, poštu, obrazovanje, razmišljanje. U kojoj ste mjeri robovi korporatizma, saznajte ovdje, na Rubu znanosti. Dobro večer. Profesor filozofije Jeffrey Grupp stiže s koleđa Henry Ford u Detroitu u Michiganu. Autor je više znanstvenih članaka u prestižnim znanstvenim publikacijama i također je predavao 5 godina na prestižnom sveučilištu Purdue, a između ostalog danas radi na Henry Ford koleđu i autor je više knjiga od kojih je ona kojom se večeras bavimo, Korporatizam. Dobro večer.
Good evening.
Što to jest korporatizam zapravo?
Corporatism is when big governments, military, and business all become one force. This is the dominant political structure of the world as far back in history as anybody can see. We're usually told that there's democracy and communism and socialism and so forth, but really it's always just one system with, if it's a medieval king back in the Dark Ages, they will have, the king will own the military and will own the food production, for example. That's corporatism, where these forces of business, military, and government become unified. This is the dominant structure all over the world today. In the recent past, such as Nazi Germany, Stalin's Russia, United States of America today, and so forth. But most people don't know this because they're not told about it. But this is the dominant political force.
Od kada datira suvremeni korporatizam kakvog danas poznajemo?
It's a very recent phenomenon for anybody to discuss this. Conspiracy theorists in America have brought this to light, and I have with my book, Korporatism, Secret Government of the New World Order. But however, this has been virtually unknown, even though we can see it with our eyes. We can all see the government and the military and industrial forces unified. Nobody's really thought about it much to where we've identified it as the issue dominating our lives, controlling our behaviors and controlling how our lives are structured and so forth. So it's very new. And politicians in America, and television in America, the main television will not discuss it at all.
Spominjete 3 faze korporatizma. Od 19. stoljeća do danas nije uvijek bio jednako vidljiv. Možete li obrazložiti te svoje teze? Koje su to faze bile?
Right. There was a first stage of corporatism, which started just after the Civil War in America, and that's when politicians started to come in and take over, just put themselves in government, big business owners would put themselves in government positions. So that means the people with the most money were in government, controlling government, so therefore running it from the big money interests. Then that was roughly the same level of corporatism until 9/11. Then things really accelerated dramatically. And in my book, Korporatizam, which was published in 2006, I predicted that in 2008 we'd enter the next level of corporatism, triggered by a financial collapse. And interestingly, that prediction did turn out to be correct, which surprised even me a little bit because it was exactly right on what the book predicted it would be. So the second phase of corporatism just is a ramping up, further increase in power of corporations. And now we're in the third phase, which was triggered by the economic collapse. Then we will see all-out power by corporations. And in America, we've seen the government has taken over the auto industry, for example. You've had huge amounts of money taken out of taxpayers' hands in America, given to the banks, and they throw wild, extravagant parties. There's signs everywhere that corporatism is increasing dramatically, which means more power to the big corporations, less for the people. So it's very much a medieval feudal structure. You've got the power players on top with all wealth, all control, and then the people on the bottom who have less and less down to nothing.
Prvenstveno se bavite, naravno, Amerikom, od kuda stižete, Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama. Pišete u knjizi da Amerikanci misle da su slobodni, ali to nisu. Na koji način bi se to mogli obrazložiti?
Americans are told that they're free from the day they enter school. Children enter school at about 5 years old in America. And they're told that they're free, that America is what's called a democracy. And they go on, they're told this every day in their churches and their schools and on television. So when they get to adulthood, they just believe this, and everybody thinks it's true. It's something that everybody says they know. But in fact, if you go ask somebody to show me how an American is free, nobody can prove it at all. And in fact, people in America, they don't get to choose how long their work week is. They're all in their jobs all the time. Americans are working 40, 60, 80 hours a week in many cases. And Americans will tell you in their work environment, I'd rather be doing something else. I'd rather be spending time with my children. I'd rather be doing anything else other than this. And so that doesn't sound very much like a free society to me. Now, take other examples, industrial products, types of cars, types of food and so forth that Americans would like to buy. Most people can't get what they want. Most Americans don't want a gas-powered car. They want a solar-powered car, for example. You can't buy one. Even though they exist, they've been developed. It's kept real quiet in the mass media in America, but they exist. Companies in California have developed them. Types of food, most Americans, even if they don't know anything about political issues, don't want chemical-filled food. It's hard to find it anywhere. Even organic food is filled with chemicals nowadays because the United States Congress said that to put organic, pure food label on food, it only has to be about 25% pure food. The rest of it can be filled with chemicals. So it's a huge deception. So in other words, there's no freedom anywhere in America, just a lot of people who think there is freedom.
Ekonomsko i povijesno poznavanje korporacija nas je već upoznalo sa idejom da je korporatizam nekakva vrsta spoja velike nedemokratske vlade i velikih tvrtki. To smo vidjeli i u Drugom svjetskom ratu, u nacističkoj Njemačkoj, pa i u Italiji pod okriljem fašizma. Čak i to bilo u to vrijeme u Europi dosta popularno i se činilo dosta efikasnim. No, ono što je novo kada vi govorite o korporatizmu jest što ga opisujete kao jednu psihološku kategoriju. Znači, to više nije samo ekonomski izraz spajanja institucija, nego on na neki način zadire u sve pore života. Na koji način je korporatizam interpretirate kao psihološku kategoriju?
Yes, that's an excellent question. The key issue about corporatism, yes, it's control of resources. And yes, it's control of, how much time we can spend with our families. That's all true. But the big thing that corporatism really is control of our consciousnesses. We think the things we do because we have limited information, specialized ways of life that we've been taught since we were very, very young. So therefore, corporatism creates our behaviors, our responses, our thoughts, and so forth. For example, in America, nobody would know that an avocado, for example, they never thought that it's shaped like a heart. It has special ingredients in it that are good for heart muscle, and it has also good for eyes, but it looks like a heart, and if you cut it in half, it looks like an eye. So it almost is as if an avocado is a supernatural substance created by some incredible intelligence as medicine for us. The average person in America has no idea what I'm talking about with it. They think it's a piece of matter with some chemicals which are roughly nutritious, and then you see how the difference is? They think one thing about an avocado versus the other. If you're an American Indian, for example, an avocado is a magical, sacred, food ingredient for, extreme health and extreme mental power. But in America, instead, they have all kinds of fabricated ideas, and so your psychology is constructed by big corporations. And in fact, the very things that we know, and the reason that spirituality is on the decline, or there's fabricated forms of spirituality in America, is specifically because people's minds are locked onto their television set, locked onto their ministers, locked into their schools, which all agree with everything on the big points. They all agree. It's just like in Orwell's 1984 when he said, everybody tells each other a lie, and so nobody knows they're telling each other a lie, so therefore the lie becomes the truth. It's the exact same thing going on in America, and so therefore there's not a free state, and the main thing that's not free is people's consciousnesses.
Kada pričamo o korporatizmu, nekome se može učiniti da je riječ o nekakvom prirodnom tijeku ekonomskih sila u liberalnom društvu, znači bogati žele postajati još bogatiji i vrlo često ljudi sve svode na trgovinu i na novac kada se priča o velikim korporacijama koje danas su već i bogatije od država. To je opće poznato. Međutim, vi navodite da iza tih korporacija i te ideje korporatizma zapravo stoji određena namjera, da nije sve proizvod ekonomskih sila, nekakvih spontanih težnji prema bogaćenju i slično. Mislite li, dakle, između spontanosti i namjere, s čim biste povezali korporatizam?
This is the big issue, the question you've just asked. Most people in America think, if they hear about government corruption, they say, oh, those, they just want to make money. That's not true. They control money. If they want more money, they can just run the printing presses longer and print more. Here's the question I have for you. Why do they make money in the ways that they do? Why do they use war to make money? Why do they use, the big pharmaceutical industry's medicine, which just contaminates everybody? You name a cure for any disease in the last 50 years out of American medicine. There's none anywhere. So, why do they choose that kind of medicine? Why do they choose industries and means of, selling products to people that always, in general, hurt people? So there's something far greater than just making money involved. There's some kind of pleasure or some kind of joy that the monopolistic corporatists have in trying to contaminate people, de-spiritualize people, take out their inherent spiritual innerness, construct their consciousness to be a shallow outer consciousness. So it's much greater than just trying to make money. It's about destruction of humanity. That's why the American Indians were so viciously targeted and put in the prisons or reservations, and then they put the nuclear waste dump right next to them to contaminate them. So it's much greater than making money. It kind of pleasure in destroying the essence of humanity.
Kako biste opisali filozofiju korporatizma? Ili ste je upravo opisali?
Well, that's a very deep question. Most people, and a very good question, most people on our planet don't find joy in these types of things. Imagine a vaccine. It has mercury in it, which completely damages a child. If you have mercury put in certain shots in two countries to the same level, the rate of autism goes up to the same degree in both countries. And there's many other arguments like that prove that vaccines are they're murder weapons. Okay? Now, what kind of a mentality would do this? This is not necessarily human in any familiar way. So the philosophy of corporatism is to take what is good and beautiful and invert it, and to take what is horrific and say that is beautiful. The war, in America they called the wars the war theater. Oh, that's curious. Remember the Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, they called that a laboratory. Now they're giving us little codes here that this is what is good and true and beautiful to them. So the philosophy, the psychology of the corporatists it's a sadomasochistic murder pleasure theater of some sort. It's an art form to them, to create the world as a big murderous art form. And it's very difficult to understand. We can see it because it's the world, but it's very hard to understand how destructive and dark it is.
Na koji način, tko su zapravo ti korporatisti? Tko su ti ljudi? Koliko ih ima? Kada pričamo o korporacijama, one su uvijek nekakva imena, logotipovi i slično. Međutim, pretpostavljam da postoje osobe koje stoje iza tih korporacija, koliko ih uopće ima i koliko je njihov utjecaj razgranat po svijetu.
Okay, the corporations, there's what's called the New World Order, which is widely discussed now. Even politicians in America will talk about the New World Order now. What the New World Order is a system that we all live in. The reason that the father can't spend more time with his children in America is because he has to go to work. In other words, go serve the New World Order system. The police run it. The professors run it. The court systems run it. Everybody works in this New World Order system. Okay, now, the tools that are used to control this massive global system are the corporations. Now, behind those someone or something is running these. Now, it's not we know that there's what's called a CEO in America, and we think that this is the person that runs the corporation, and they'll be on TV with a big smiley face, act like a real nice guy and everything, while their corporation is, responsible for contaminating or poisoning and killing millions of people or whatever they do, ruining life, ruining family structure, and so forth. Now, but it's not really clear that CEO is the actual person that runs it, because if you look a little further, you find out that there's a board, what's called the board, a group of controllers behind the CEO that controls the CEO. Then it raises the question, who controls the board? And that's not really known. Nobody really, and it has to be somebody, because it's something. It's not because all these corporations work together in unison. Why do all the big monopolistic corporations, why do they all destroy humanity? Why isn't there one out there that uses, healthy food to make us live longer so they can make money off us longer? No, they don't do that. It's always about destruction. So it's almost as if they're acting together. So some very dark force is behind the corporations themselves, the human controllers behind them.
Kada pričamo o načinima kako se korporatizam održava u životu, zapravo pričamo o nekakvoj maloj grupici moćnih ljudi koji na neki način utječu na većinu populacije zemlje. Na neki način riječ bi bila o sustavu koji upravlja samim sobom. Pitanje bi bilo koje su to metode, taktike ili strukture smišljene pa da sustav može uopće tako funkcionirati da većina ljudi na neki način same sebe čuva od, da kažemo, same sebe čuva zaključene u kavezu.
The whole system is about that. If you go to a school, schooling is the best example. The average, if you have look at an opinion poll in America of the most trusted people, you can go to pollingreport.com and they have all these opinion polls. You can see the most trusted people in America are nurses, college professors, and so forth. These people are the ones who are spreading the information, all this unverifiable, non-scientific information like global warming and so forth, to the masses. So a school is a perfect example. People are taught to trust it. They're taught, the big oil leaders and the politicians, they lie to you. But not the school teachers over here. They're innocent and they mean well. They don't lie. When in fact, if they don't lie, then go show me global warming. Why can't I see it? It's colder where I live in America, Ann Arbor, Michigan. And instead, they want me I'm supposed to believe that it exists. Why can't they show me the facts of evolution? Why can't they show me the facts of the Big Bang? If I ask them, prove these things to me, they just give me a bunch of theories. So a school, they often will take things that are secretly look to be very kind and innocent, but they're actually the real weapons that go in and attack the heart and soul of a person.
U knjizi dajete puno primjera analize medija i analize vijesti. Zanimljivo je vidjeti, jer to se sve više zbiva i na europskom kontinentu i kod nas, a u Americi je prvo počelo, na koji način mediji orkestrirano rade, na koji način neke priče uzimaju i daju im veliki značaj, neke druge nikad ne spominju. Primijetio sam čak da ste na neki način počeli testirati istinitost vijesti upravo po tome da li se nalaze u korporativnim medijima ili ne. Drugim riječima, kakva je doista situacija prema vama vezana uz medije, uz vijesti, kako uopće čovjek može prepoznati što mu se nameće, a što skriva?
Excellent question. What you can see with your own eyes, you can verify to be real. If you can't trust that it's real. And most of the information in schools, to keep going talking about schools, is that type of information that you can't see. They'll say, please believe us that the Roman Empire existed at this specific time and fell because the Goths invaded. Just believe us. If I say, excuse me, teacher, can you prove this to me? No, is the answer. So the only way to actually know anything, and this goes for anybody in science, if you're a police officer, if you're working at courts, a teacher, minister, anything, real information comes to us by what we can see. This is the essence of science, which philosophers like David Hume and René Descartes and so forth laid down for us, hundreds of years ago. But that's basically, even in the universities in America, it's basically completely forgotten. And it's all about theory and, what big money can enter the picture to make someone certain kinds of, harmful vaccines or whatever in the university. But so to answer your question, the most important thing I'll say today is that the only way to know anything is real is if you can see it. If you can't, you have to be skeptical skeptical of it because someone can lie. If you believe what you can't see, someone can lie to you, trick you. That's why politicians in America get so angry, and they'll say it on television when someone's a skeptic or when someone doesn't believe what they say or when someone asks proof. A lot of people asked George Bush for proof before he invaded Iraq in 2003, and he never presented it. Why? Because it wasn't there. What if Americans in greater numbers said, no, we want proof. We'll go to war if you show us there's a real threat. They didn't. He went to war. It was all a big lie.
Možete li dati nekoliko primjera orkestriranog djelovanja velikih medija? Na primjeru SAD-a, od kuda stižete. Nije teško pitanje.
No. Why? Have you ever heard of has the average person ever heard of depleted uranium? Maybe they have here in Croatia. In America, nobody. Virtually nobody knows about it, but they're all breathing it in. It's all inside their body. It's toxic substances which were part of the weaponry used in places like Israel and the Middle East and so forth, and the recent, the wars over the last 20 years there. It's covered the whole atmosphere, but yet nobody knows anything about it. But they all know that there's a, young lady in America named Britney Spears who shaved all her hair off. I mean, so they're feeding us information that makes us completely stupid. Okay, and you can see this in the faces of Americans. They are like a hollow shell. There's nothing in there. The average American, they're confused and lost because they don't have the real information makes us feel good. The ancient philosopher Aristotle said humans, for some reason, have this curiosity to know things. Well, if you take that out of someone, they're not human anymore. Okay, so the average person in America goes on believing all the lies and what they hear. And that's the news, they think. So the fake, non-real information they think is the real. So specific examples, is a football game the biggest piece of news in the day, or that the U.S. military slaughtered another 50 people in Pakistan. Is that the news? They'll put the football game on first, and maybe people are so used to, the U.S. military killing people in all these wars that they won't even cover it anymore. So the football game becomes the dominant thing in someone's mind, and they no longer think about the casualties of the wars that American soldiers are carrying out. See how your psychology is created, like we were talking about earlier. You can become concerned with one thing because it's displayed for you in the media, not another. So the important things are forgotten, and the non-important things are made to be your consciousness.
Ono što opisujete staromodno bi se moglo nazvati ispiranjem mozga, programiranjem, hipnotiziranjem, puno je naziva za takav način djelovanja. A ono po čemu, koliko ste predstavili u knjizi, se takve stvari mogu uočiti je to što se na svim mrežama istovremeno predstavljaju uvijek iste vijesti kao senzacionalne. Naravno, pitanje se nameće, ne bi li možda netko drugi pokušao zaraditi neki novac s nekom drugom viješću koju nitko drugi nije objavio i slično. A takvih priča svakako ima. Naravno, korporatisti očito nije teško im utjecati na medije kad ih posjeduju. No, mogli bi sada, kad pričamo o korporatizmu, zahvatiti ga po nekoliko točaka koje ga čine, s obzirom da je tema poprilično široka, a korporatizam, koliko sam shvatio iz vaših knjiga, prije svega čine mnogobrojni mitovi koje zapravo treba na neki način jednog po jednog uzimati u obzir i promatrati. Bavite se recimo temom da je netočno da je nafta neophodan pokretač svijeta, što je danas teško zamislivo. Nekad davno smo imali čak i konoplju koja je bila daleko sofisticiranija i naprednija. Ispričajte nam malo kako bi svijet mogao biti bez nafte, koliko bi koristi mogli imati od zaboravljenih biljaka, poput konoplje recimo, i kakve su sve njene osobine.
Well, with hemp, you or I could grow it, and we can create our own oil. You can make anything out of. Henry Ford built a car out of hemp. You can make metal-like substances and so forth. But see, you or I could grow that in our own backyard, for example. But with oil, it's far away. Nobody can see it. Since nobody can verify how much is there, we can't see how much is there. They can say, "Oh, there's not much left. We're running out." So the supply is low and the demand is high, so the price goes up artificially. It's all fake. Okay, I mean, and the reason is because remember when oil went to $150 US dollars a gallon a few years ago, and then it went back down. If I say if all our economics professors are telling us that supply and demand rules the economic landscape of the world, well, that doesn't make sense then. It shouldn't have gone up like that and then come back down. So, but anyways, with hemp, that's a substance that can be controlled by the people, and that's the ultimate enemy of corporatism. If you grow hemp and I write a book and I want to trade you hemp oil because it's incredible. Hemp seed oil is one of the most healthy substances on the planet. And I want to trade you hemp seed oil for a book. We trade products. We cut out the New World Order. We cut out the corporatists. See, that's power. That's what the American Indians did. That's what always the corporatists like to get rid of. When you go to, there's a store called Walmart in America, huge stores which sell every product. If you go to Walmart and you buy a product, what you do is you give some of your money to that person, but that person didn't create the product, and they get almost none of the money, maybe a penny of what you gave them. Instead, it goes to someone far away who didn't even do any of the work. It isn't even there present. It doesn't have anything to do with anything, except they say we own it, and so therefore we get all the huge cut of the money. That's the problem. See what the American Indians did, for example, to bring them up again. They cut out that. They didn't have that process. Well, they bought and sold directly. That's what hemp has the power to do. There's a revolution in America that's brewing, a medical marijuana and hemp revolution, which I think will take off, but it has to be done where the corporatists don't get in and take over the industry. It has to be from person to person. That's the only way humans on planet Earth will gain freedom, is if we sell and trade resources directly from each. As soon as you have a person involved who doesn't do the work, then you have corporatism and monopolistic takeover.
Spomenuo sam naftu jer je zapravo iznenađujuće da postoje alternative za naftu. Kod konoplje od nje se mogu raditi cigle, odjeća, lijekovi, hrana, naraste 3 metra za godinu dana, održava tlo živim i slično. Bavite se drugim mitovima, pa možemo malo proći kroz njih. Recimo, tvrdite da u Americi postoji mit o privatnom vlasništvu. Da Amerika zapravo nije kapitalistička zemlja koja se temelji na slobodnom poduzetništvu i privatnom vlasništvu. Na koji način bi se moglo vidjeti znanstveno, logički, da zapravo Amerika nije zemlja privatnog vlasništva?
It's amazing that it's this way, where people think they own something in America if you have to pay the bank for it. Okay, and if you stop paying the bank, they send the police to take the land back if you bought land or your car or whatever. Now that's not ownership, but in America, people call it ownership. Okay, no, that's somebody else owns you something and you have to pay them to keep it. It's the opposite of ownership. Now, the same exists if I buy a piece of land and say I pay the bank off and I don't owe them any more money, after 30 years and, half my life savings and, I pay them 5 times the amount through interest. Say I do succeed in paying them off, but then I have to pay huge taxes to the government. So then it's also the same scenario. We own it if we pay somebody for it. Now, that's not, there is virtually no ownership, private ownership, where you have something, nobody can come and get it. If somebody tries to, the police will come and protect you. There's virtually none of that anywhere in America because of taxes and bank. Somebody will owe the bank for something. So now this is how strange things get in America. You can have people think it's a capitalist nation of private ownership when there's virtually no private ownership anywhere. That's how deceived, that's how artificial people's psychologies have become, where they think what is true is false and what is false is true.
I općenito podjela na kapitalizam i komunizam koja je bila u mori u 20. stoljeću dosta je zapravo čudna, jer i komunističke zemlje su stvari akumulirale kapital kroz tvornice i slično, mada on nije bio u privatnom vlasništvu, pa su zapravo i one na neki način bile kapitalističke. No, idemo mi dalje kroz neke zanimljive mitove. Recimo, jedan od najvažnijih tiče se ekonomije. Pokazali ste nekoliko klasičnih novo-orvelovskih primjera dvomišljenja, znači rečenica koje su potpuno u kontradikciji, koje se nalaze u ekonomskim udžbenicima i slično. Riječ je o tome mogu li se predvidjeti ekonomske krize ili ne mogu. Postoji li nešto kao što je prirodni poslovni ciklus ili ne postoji? Ako ne postoji, na koji način se generiraju krize i na koji način se stvara vrijeme prosperiteta? Koji bi znači to bili mitovi koje ste čak pronašli u klasičnim sveučilišnim udžbenicama ekonomije kao opće prihvaćene istine koje u praksi često puta se same dementiraju?
This is one of the most interesting issues. In America, they will tell you on TV, it's very hard to know if the economy is going to rise, which means the big corporatists get more money and then the average person just has to work more. They will tell you it's very hard to predict when the business cycle goes up or the business cycle goes down. Now, they'll say also on American television, they have a channel called the Stock Market Channel, CNBC. They'll also say that if you raise interest rates, it has the potential to slow the economy down. And I say, well, wait a minute, if you just said we can't predict that, how can you know if someone does that, it could slow the economy down and essentially predict that? So to get to the point, the business cycle, as it's called in America, is completely predictable. If the Federal Reserve, which controls the money supply in America, just a few people control it, if they slow down their amount of the money that they release to the banks and therefore to the public through loans, and or if they change the interest rates that people have to pay on their, when they go get a loan to buy something, if the rates go up, people buy less. So these two things make it completely simple to control the entire economy. Yeah, you go ask the average American, is the American economy just completely spontaneous and undirected? Or are there specific things that a few people, maybe 6 people in the Federal Reserve can do to affect the whole economy? And the average person in America will say, oh, it's completely spontaneous and nobody controls anything and you can't predict anything. Complete lie. You can see it happening right in front of your eyes. And they will say on national TV in America, if they raise rates, the economy will slow. But the average person doesn't understand that. Not only is that going on, but further it means there's just a few people that control the whole world. Because if the American economy is the biggest economy in the world, and therefore influences the whole world, and just a few people control it, then there's a few people who control the whole world. That's called a secret government. Okay, forget President Obama, forget President Bush, forget all these people who say that they control the world. The money controls behavior, which controls us. Okay? And if the money is controlled by a few people, the whole world is controlled by a secret group.
Spominjete mit vezan uz jedno od glavnih temelizma, a to jest da potrošač zapravo kontrolira sa svojim izborima tržište, da potrošač odlučuje koji proizvod je bolji, koji proizvod je gori i slično. Međutim, zapravo potrošači kroz izbor ispada da ne kontroliraju ništa. Imate li, recimo, primjera kojim biste potkrijepili tu svoju tezu koja tvrdi da ona teza o potrošačima koji kontroliraju društvo zapravo nije točna?
Yeah, consumers could control everything if they wanted, but what they do is they settle for and they find acceptable the products that are presented to them, and they'll choose from the one news network over the other, which say the same things, or they'll choose Coke or Pepsi, which tastes the same, or they'll choose this junky American car, which will break down in a few years, versus this one that'll break down in a few years. So they're given these choices which aren't choices. Okay, the point here is that if Americans wanted to, they could just cut out, all this choosing for them. And instead, they could just create their own industries. They could create any product they want, solar power, organic farming, superconductivity, medical marijuana, anything they wanted. Just regular marijuana, hemp industry. If they just turned off their televisions, because American television is really bad. There's no show like this on American mainstream television anywhere. If they just simply did that and started industries, they could do anything they wanted. So they could cut out the New World Order system, the monopolistic corporatists, and give power to themselves by controlling industries that help rather than hurt people, but they don't. Instead, they settle for the junky products that often are made by slave children in China, which get shipped over to America. Instead, they settle for that so they don't have to think about it. That's essentially what happens.
Pričamo još malo o novcu. U zadnjih 3-4 godine do mnogo ljudi je došla izjava novac je dug, koja zapravo prije nije bila jako poznata. Nekad davno su naravno države tiskale novac, one su imali čak i neko pokriće prije 40 godina u zlatu, u srebru i slično. Naravno, zlatni standard je ukinut. Međutim, kada se to dogodilo i kako da je novac postao dug i što to uopće znači?
Yeah, if somebody was to give you land, say, here, just take this land, it's yours. You don't know anybody for it. Build a house, have children, grow a farm, do whatever you want. That's called wealth. But if you suggest that to the average person in America, they'll laugh at you. Oh, that never happens. No, because to get something, you need to go get a loan. You need to go get debt money that you have to pay back several times more through interest to have these items that the average person should just have as their natural right as being a human on planet Earth. No, in this world, you have to be a slave. You have to work to exist. Other cultures before ours, in primitive times and so forth, that was not the case. You exist, so therefore this is all given to you. You can have these trees to make products. You can have this land to raise your children in safety and so forth. If the warring tribe comes nearby, you have this land to make weapons to keep them. Hopefully just the display of weapons will keep them away and no conflict will arise. So what happens in America is people have no idea what wealth means. It's a philosophy. It means you have something that is mine, which nobody can take, and it gives me power. Okay, that doesn't exist in America. You have something that you have to pay back if you're lucky. and you work your whole life to pay it back, and your whole life is therefore given to the debt system. So money doesn't exist. Debt exists. And the whole system is made up on that, and people are so used to it that they don't even understand that there's a difference.
Je li istina da zapravo sav novac koji američka država proizvede i stavi u opticaj zapravo je posudilo od privatnih bankara kojima za to plaća kamate na temelju nezakonitog poreza na dohodak?
Yes, the idea in America that there's a government for the people is completely fabricated. There's a couple people that Americans see on TV. President Barack Obama, he's always got a nice smile, and then he lies about everything. Okay, there's a couple senators that'll talk about we need war, and then they'll smile about everything. It's just all a big joke. Americans think that's the government. Okay, and it has nothing to do with anything about their daily life. Then on the other hand, there's all this private money, private in the corporatist hands. There are people that have wealth in America. It's those people. Okay, everybody else doesn't. They own it all. Okay, so what will happen then in America is you will have just a few people on the very top who will have perfect ownership of things, and then in such a degree that they even create the money, where the average citizen in America just doesn't even understand that.
Kakva je uloga medicine, odnosno kako se ona uklapa u korporatizam? Danas više nije nepoznato da korporacije financiraju istraživanja, da to ima zapravo jako puno netočnih rezultata, da lijekovi blockbusteri nisu toliko efikasni kako se reklamiraju. No, kako se uistinu medicina uklapa u cjelokupnu filozofiju korporatizma?
Oh, medicine. Oh, remember we talked earlier about how industries are created to hurt people? Well, there's no better example than what is called medicine. It's not medicine. Medicine is something that gives you physiological power or mental power. It's something that extends your life, gives you health so you can run faster, feel better, and so forth. In American medicine, if you have cancer, what they do is they will radiate you, which is something that causes cancer. So it's so absurd that, but I think it was Hitler who said the more absurd things are, the better people will believe it. Medicine is a perfect example of that. There's no cures for anything. I think the last cure was a polio vaccine. And if you look into that, it wasn't a cure. They changed the definition of polio right when the vaccine was introduced, so very much fewer people had it. That's right in medical textbooks even have that in their history sections of their books. But the average person doesn't think about this. They're told on the news, oh, American medicine is amazing. All these chemicals you can put in your body, all these machines and probes they have that can search your body. Now, here's a question for you. Why do we have cancer? Why do we have diabetes, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, all these diseases? When explorers go and find rainforest tribes, they don't have any of these. They live long. They don't even have anorexia. So there's psychological issues going on here. Medicine is sort of the best example, the microcosmic view of the whole prison system called the New World Order that we're all stuck living in. And the best way to see the alternative, the way it should be, is to look at those rainforest Indians or American Indians. But they used to call cancer the disease of civilization because explorers would go and find primitive peoples that were never encountered Europeans before. And they would survey 30,000 of them, the old people, no cancer anywhere. Nothing that had symptoms resembling cancer. So the diseases are created by the poisonous food, poisonous air, chemtrails, you name it, the bad psychology. And then what you're given to heal it is more poison.
Na koji način reagiraju recimo vaši studenti kada mi iznesete neke od ovih teza? Pretpostavljam da, kao što ste napisali u knjizi, mnogi od njih misle ili vjeruju da su istinite tvrdnje da recimo farmaceutska industrija godišnje proizvede desetke novih lijekova u koje je uložila $100 milijuna i slično. Na kraju vi dajete dokaze da zapravo ona ne proizvodi nikakve lijekove skoro nikad. Kako se studenti vaši reagiraju ili nose sa takvim informacijama, od kojih su neke, pretpostavljam, dosta šokantne za njih?
Yeah, most of the time I don't present anything like this to students. But I do teach them, remember we talked earlier about the only way to know anything is with your eyes. I teach them that. I teach a class called Logic. And the essence of logic is how do you know anything? And that one way you can form a logical system is by having a verification system with your senses. Now, I can't talk about all these topics in a university. I talked about some of them when I taught at Purdue University, and I got in trouble. They said, no, don't do that. or else we'll remove you. And I had to stop doing that. So the answer is I can't talk about much of this. When I do sometimes bring up something like this, the students act in three ways. They can't believe it, and they want more information now. I want more. That's amazing. Tell me more and more and more. That's the few. Most of the students don't care. Okay, they're just thinking about MTV and football or whatever. And then there's a few students, more than a few, very, very angry. How dare you say something that disagrees with what I've been told? And I'll say, wait a minute, you can see it. What I just told you, you can see with your own eyes. It's different than what somebody told you, which you can't see. That could be a lie or a truth, you don't know. But what you can see, you can make it be, you can find to be true. They get very angry, and they'll make up stories and go complain to the dean and the college administration and say, Jeffy's bad, he told all these lies. And I'll just say I'm using empirical information.
Posebni dio medicine koja je jedna ruka korporatizma, kako vi predstavljate, su mentalne bolesti, takozvane. Što su lijekovi za mentalne bolesti i što su uopće mentalne bolesti, kako se njima danas manipulira?
Oh, we've got a thing in America called ADHD. And that's basically where you tell a child if they do any kind of behavior other than sit there like a little soldier in their school classroom, that they have a brain disorder called ADHD. And if you ask the doctor who diagnoses them, say, doctor, can you show me some proof? Show me a map of their brain that shows the disorder. They'll say, I can't do it. We never did a map of the brain. Then I'll say, how do you know that there's a disorder? And then they'll say, the answer is because of their behavior. And I'll say, oh, wait a minute. Then we're talking about psychology. We're not talking about medicine. So you're just making a judgment on what you think is normal and not normal. To answer your question, the mental diseases are all made up. If what I just said wasn't true, then why in the 1950s in America, there was no ADHD. They didn't even talk about it. The idea was invented later in the 1970s. But in the 1950s, America had what was considered the best education system in the world with none of this talk about ADHD. Now, ADHD and the poisonous drugs they give children to try to cure it, which doesn't work anyways, it's nothing to cure anyways, it inundates the school system, and we've got what's considered the third worst education system in the world. So that's just one way. If someone it's called schizophrenia. Oh, then people say, oh, but that's a mental disorder. And I say, well, that's interesting because primitive peoples, the person who had the vision, the schizophrenic vision, schizophrenic dream or prophecy, they were made the king, the shaman. So that was very successful for that person to have these abilities. So the whole idea of if you just go ask someone, verify for me that all these mental illnesses exist, they can't do it. It's just all made up. You're supposed to fit into what is normal versus abnormal. What is normal is what is constructed for the corporatist superstate. What is abnormal is what doesn't fit in.
Posebna priča su takozvani antidepresivi, odnosno bolesti koje liječe depresije. U knjizi pišete da je zapravo depresija proizvod neprirodnog društva u kojem se ljudi nalaze i zapravo je društvo uzrok, pa bi trebalo izliječiti društvo da im se izliječi depresije. No, na neki način te depresije se uvijek liječe lijekovima. U ovoj emisiji smo već spominjali te lijekove. Dosta uspješno liječe depresije, pogotovo ako natjeraju čovjeka na samoubojstvo. To znači da je izliječenje od depresije u tom smislu potpuno. No, na koji način danas u Americi, a to bi trebao biti obrazac pomalo i za cijeli svijet, kako to postupno ide, se pristupa tim konkretno depresijama, odnosno lijekovima za depresiju, zbog čega svi ti Amerikanci idu kod psihijatra, barem oni koje sam ja vidio u filmovima?
Yeah, the antidepressants are a result of environmental problems. If you take a monkey and put it into a wrong environment, it'll run back to its original environment. If you take a lion and put it in its wrong environment, it'll go back to its natural environment. A natural environment for a human is to be surrounded by nature and live off of nature, creating products themselves that they trade with each other. Okay, if you take a human out of, and also in the meantime, being with their family, doing spiritual practices, and so forth. Now, if you take someone out of that, they will malfunction. And the first thing to malfunction will be their consciousness. If you take a mother away from its young children, which is absolutely common in America, all over, the children are put in what's called daycare. I mean, 70% of babies at 6 weeks old or 12 weeks old go into daycare so the mothers can go back to work for the corporation. Now, a huge percentage of those mothers become severely depressed. Well, of course they do. Because what's more powerful than the instinct to love your child, which I have. I've got 3 children. So it's environmental problems which give rise to these issues. But no, see, that you can see. I can see if I take someone out of their environment and put them here, they get sad. If I put them back, they get happy. So it's scientific. I can see it. But no, I'm not supposed to believe that in America. I'm supposed to believe, no, it's a brain disorder, which I can't see. I can't see inside your head to see what your brain chemicals are doing. But I'm supposed to believe some doctor, very fancy, telling me it's a brain disorder, that's the cause of the problems.
Zanimljiv primjer ste dali u knjizi onog što bi se definiralo mentalnom bolešću. Naime, test na Kraljevskom sveučilištu Holloway doktora Patricka Lemana jest jedan test mentalnog zdravlja. Sjećate li se tog detalja iz knjige? Možete nam ispričati nešto o tom testu? Kako se tamo testira mentalno zdravlje?
Basically, if you were suspicious of anything or believed anything that wasn't the mainstream view, what everybody else thinks, you were called mentally ill. So there was absolutely the idea of a scientific study was completely thrown out.
Znači, to je test za mentalno zdravlje.
Oh, no, it's testing how well you fit into a sick society, which is what psychology in America is. You're abnormal if you don't, you're normal if you do.
Spominjete brojne nedokazane mitove o kalciju, osteoporozi. Spominjete da se u medicini nauči o prehrani, da se spominju nedokazive. Koji su to bitni dijelovi koji bi recimo trebali biti u medicini po vama, umjesto ovih koje ste spomenuli?
Medical students in America, as I cite in my book, are taught that if you consider nutrition a way to achieve health, that is erroneous information. What will give nutrition is being healed from certain drugs, which don't heal anyways. They just reduce symptoms at most. So the idea of nutrition in America, now the general public in America is somewhat concerned with nutrition. That's why the organic food industry, which really isn't organic, is on the rise in America. Now, on the other hand, though, the average person in America doesn't know anything. They're concerned with nutrition but don't know anything about it. And medical students are not there. You can go through all of medical school without being taught a class on nutrition. But if I was to analyze the chemicals of my immune system, for example, it's made of all these vitamins and minerals that when you go take vitamins or supplements, so you're feeding your immune system. That's why I can give a person I know vitamins and minerals, and they can go 2 years without getting any kind of sickness at all. Because that's what your body needs. Your brain is made out of, 60% of it is made out of omega oil. All different parts of your neurons are made out of omega oil. Go ask a doctor in America, is omega oil important to take? I don't know. Or they'll say no or something like that. When it's because they're not studying the makeup of the physiology, only how you can alter it with chemicals. So actual medicine, which involves nutrition, doesn't have anything to do with medicine in America.
Ne birate baš reći kada govorite o aktuelnom svjetskom poretku. On je prisutan naravno u Americi gdje vi živite, ali također ga prepoznate i u ostatku svijeta jer korporacije su nadnacionalne, pa tako štete i Americi kao državi kao i svakoj drugoj. Koristite riječi kao totalitarizam, fašizam, čak i komunizam u američkom smislu te riječi, kod nas ta izvuči neke druge konotacije. Drugim riječima, diktatura. Međutim, mnogi ljudi smatraju da je diktatura kad imamo jednog diktatora, centralnu vlast i onda se to sve to piramidalno širi. No, to je možda još jedna kriva prerudžba diktature, jer ovdje pričamo o diktaturi koja zapravo nema jedan vidljivi centar, nego ih ima barem nekoliko. Kakva je zapravo priroda te diktature i po čemu je cijeli taj sustav koji se nameće sustavno svijetu, tako i u Europi isto u zadnjih 10-15 godina, 20 i duže, po čemu je on zapravo diktatorski?
Okay, and what we're usually taught dictatorship is there's somebody you can see who controls everything. Hitler is always the example in America used. And if he's the dictator, why did he get so much money from Ford Motor Company, from IBM? They gave him the little population machines, just gave them to him basically at a huge discount. When you go to the Holocaust Museum in the United States in Washington, D.C., you walk right into the building, they have the population machine that says IBM. The idea of a dictatorship is put everywhere in front of everybody's face in America. the guy in North Korea, Saddam Hussein. Everybody gets all riled up and angry. Oh, those dictators. And nobody stops for a second to think, how did Hitler come into power in 4 years and take Germany from economic desolation to the world's superpower? Because he was funded. Instead, Americans will think, oh, he was just a smart guy. He knew how to build the nation up or something. They don't trace the money. So the whole idea of dictatorship that the average person in America at least thinks of has nothing to do with anything, because they're not looking at the real dictators. Nobody really knows who the real dictators are. Remember we talked earlier about there's the corporation, the CEO, the board, and then who controls that? That's the real dictatorial power, but nobody really knows exactly. You've had David Icke here before, and he says it's in a super advanced entity of some sort, not necessarily human. There is some argument to that, because a lot of the technologies that we see in the world don't seem to have human origin, like Morgellons disease is one. So it is possible that behind all this is some non-human entity. There is some evidence to support that claim.
Što bi odgovorilo na pitanje kako su ljudi mogli napraviti nešto tako neljudsko kao što je korporatizam. U svakom slučaju, bio je prvi dio razgovora sa Jeffreyem Gruppom. Hvala, nastavit ćemo. Dobro večer. Danas nastavljamo razgovor i intervju koji smo započeli prošloga tjedna sa američkim profesorom filozofije Jeffreyem Gruppom, koji stiže za koledža Henry Ford iz Detroita, iz Michigana. U svom životopisu dosta bogatom ima i godine predavanja na prestižnom Purdue institutu, sveučilištu, kao i veliki broj znanstvenih radova, nekoliko knjiga. Međutim, danas smo ovdje zbog knjige koja se zove Korporatizam. Dobro večer. Prošloga tjedna smo već dali nekakve naznake, crtice i opise korporatizma, zato jer je to dosta velika tema koja se na različite načine manifestira. No, ponovimo za one koji su se tek sada uključili, što to jest korporatizam i u kojem smislu ga doživljavate, ne samo kao sredstvo stjecanja novca, kapitala ili sprega vlasti i korporacija, već kao jedan psihološki sustav koji zapravo poroblje ljude. Kako biste predstavili korporatizam, kako ga vi vidite?
Last week on the show, we discussed how the whole world we can verify is controlled by just very small groups. They control behavior and thought and so forth. Now, to understand corporatism, you have to understand that how all our resources we use and that we need to survive in life are controlled just by a few people. That's one point. And then on the other hand, the world is a huge disaster. There's poverty, disease, war, and so forth everywhere. So corporatism isn't just about small groups of very powerful, monopolistic, wealthy people, wealthy industry leaders controlling our resources. That's part of it. But the other part is they do so in a way that makes the world an absolutely miserable place to be. And why do I say that? Because you can see that with your eyes. The continent of Africa has riots and wars all over it. America has impoverished people all over, and those who aren't have to work so much that the family structure is destroyed in America. Corporatism is, yes, it's a force out there where the government, military, and the industries become united, form one force. But more than that, what corporatism really is how that makes your feelings, how your feelings respond, how your life is structured in response to that, how your life resembles a slave where you can't make choices. You can't choose what time you get up in the morning. It's chosen for you by what job you have. Some corporation will choose it for you.
Ključno što korporatizam nije tek neka slučajna pojava koja se eto dogodila ekonomskim ciklusima, već sve te negativnosti korporatizma obrazlažete u knjizi kao proizvod namjere da baš tako bude. Je li to točno?
Why isn't there a huge monopolistic corporation out there that decides to make extremely healthy vitamins and foods and medicines for us, so to make people live longer so they can make money off them longer? Why doesn't that happen? Why is it always the destruction of humanity that is the project? Because the point isn't to make as much money as possible. The point is to create as much misery as possible. My proof of that is look at the world. The world is... Most people live their lives not having the feelings they want within them. Most people live their lives having to do jobs that they don't like, which give them all these, depression and so forth that we talked about in the last show. Now, a lot of people will say, well, Jeff, that's just how things have to be. People have to work. I'm not rejecting that. The point is if you go study a primitive culture, they don't have poverty. They've got incredible amounts of leisure time. We don't even understand their lives because they have so much leisure time. They have medicines that are free. Food is free. They have actual wealth, things that they own. Everybody has the same level of house, which can be constructed by anybody. It's a completely different kind of lifestyle.
Nema kriminala, primjerice.
There's a group called the Penan, P-E-N-A-N, in Borneo, with the largest island in the world. They don't even have it's been reported in a book called Stranger in the Forest, written by Eric Hansen, that they don't even have a word in their language for rape. Okay? Now go tell the average American that rape is just a construct of the environmental situation you're in, and they won't believe you. Well, that's evidence that it is.
Korporatizam ima puno lica i puno svojih ruku. U prošloj emisiji govorili smo o medicini i o nekim drugim elementima kojima korporatizam vlada svijetom. Jedan od najvažnijih je takozvani false flag terorizam, odnosno terorizam pod lažnom zastavom. Što je dakle taj teško prevediv američki idiom false flag terorizam, koji su njegovi primjeri, gdje se danas primjenjuje i zašto?
False flag terrorism is a scenario where you are told by the powers that control information that some entity of some sort is a threat, but it really isn't. There's a different threat, which they don't tell you about. Now, the big famous example that many people in America are concerned with is 9/11, where we were told that this certain group of people that we can't see, that live in caves, did this damage to us, but nobody can prove it. And then if you look into it a little bit, you find out you don't even know if that group exists. And further, they didn't do it. None of the stuff, there was no plane that hit the Pentagon, okay? They couldn't wire up the building, the third building in New York that fell at 6 o'clock in the evening. So now, another thing to understand about false flag terrorism is it's very important for people to understand what I'm about to say. False flag terrorism is not just that. False flag terrorism makes up the basis of life in American culture. Take, for example, cancer. Everybody in America is worried about cancer. People, it could strike at any time. So their whole life is made up of a threat that may not be real. And in fact, if they just changed the way they ate, there would be no cancer. Proof of that is primitive cultures, as we talked about last time, don't have cancer because they eat different. So if we did the same, we would. So there's another threat that is not quite real or doesn't need to be real. There's many things that take the structure of a false flag where we're told there's a threat, but there really isn't. There's something else that's a threat. So there's big examples, but in general, life overall is a false flag type of attack.
Jedan od najvećih false flag događaja, a bilo ih je dosta u ovom stoljeću, jest upravo one koje ste spomenuli, 9/11. U vašoj knjizi odlučili ste se baviti baš avionom i Pentagonom, zanemarivši ostale podatke kojih ima toliko da se mogu napuniti knjige. Zbog čega ste baš izabrali udar aviona u Pentagon i što je to tamo u tolikom raskoraku od onog što se inače govori, drugim riječima u raskoraku od zdrave logike, razuma i rasuđivanja? Kako biste drugim riječima nekoga uvjerili da se to nije dogodilo? Kojim argumentima?
Yeah, I've had people ask me that before. Why did I just focus on the Pentagon? The answer to that question is because I wasn't sure of my analysis yet about the Twin Towers. Now I am. I hold the very controversial view that there may not have been planes at the Twin Towers. Now, in America, even among conspiracy theorists, you're not supposed to say that. But the problem is on NBC, one of the main media broadcast networks in America, when they show the second tower falling and the explosion happening, there was no plane. Right there in the media footage, there's no planes. So I noticed this back when I was writing Korporatism, and I didn't want to get into that issue because I wasn't sure. A lot of people were talking about how can the plane hit and can there be planes that don't have pilots, and I didn't want to get into that big mess. It seemed like kind of a trick. We're supposed to argue about all these crazy issues. I wanted to go to the simple issue, the Pentagon, okay? How could it be, it's important to understand about the Pentagon, there was an explosion there. And then 20 minutes later, the roof, part of the roof collapsed. Okay, now it's important to understand, before the roof collapsed, the windows weren't even broken. Now, how can a plane going 500 miles an hour that weighs 60 tons with two huge 10-ton engines smash into that wall, not even break a window, not even make any kind of hole in the wall, and have no parts anywhere? Answer, there was no plane. Okay.
Kakva su službena objašnjenja gdje je avion nestao? Zašto nisu stakla popucana ili jesu? Da čujemo ponešto od toga. Možda ima istinu u tome.
It's very funny, this story. First of all, they don't typically show. Sometimes you'll see the before the collapse. Most pictures are after the collapse, and then people will say, "Of course, there was windows broken. But if you say, well, what about before the collapse?" They try not to discuss that in the mass media. But sometimes will show a picture will slip out in the mass media. Now, it's very funny, their explanation of what happened at the Pentagon. They say that the reason that no plane parts were found is because the plane melted. Okay, now this is very humorous because if steel of that much steel is going to evaporate away, it has to become half the temperature of the surface of the sun. Okay, now if that happened in the middle of Washington, D.C., there could be nobody that could get within 100 miles of Washington, D.C. because it would be so warm. Yet, you look at the Pentagon, and you can see right there in parts of the wall that cave collapsed away. There's a book there. The pages aren't even singed and so forth. So they're just lying about what happened. They're making up crazy stories. It's almost like they got in a room and said, let's make up the dumbest, most humorous story possible. Tell them a plane evaporated. And we'll tell the people that.
Komentirali ste I veličinu rupe u zidu.
Oh, yeah. It appears the pre-collapse Pentagon, some people say that they can see a little 10-foot hole, which kind of looks like a missile hole. Looks a lot like a Scud missile hole. Now, I didn't comment a whole lot on that in Korporatizam because it's a little bit tough to see exactly what is there. But it does kind of look like there's a hole before the roof collapse. So that evidence with the collapse would have been removed. Interesting.
Značilo bi da je cijeli avion proletio kroz tu rupu, ako sam dobro shvatio.
Well, they try to say that, this is good, they try to say that the wings folded up. Okay, now ask yourself, if the two jet engines make up the bulk of the plane, okay, the fuselage is just a lightweight, light metal hollow core. It has to be light so the plane can be up in the air. Okay, so if the wings folded up, that means that the two jet engines stopped, reverse direction, moved inward for some unknown reason. What force would cause that? And then proceeded to instantly go 500 miles an hour again into the building. Then they melted and evaporated. This is the epitome of non-logic, of insanity. And it's very funny, really, when you think about it.
Ponekad u knjizi citirate I Davida Icka, koji je upravo radi ovakvih situacija, ovakvih objašnjenja u nekoliko puta komentirao jednom rečenicu koja je glasila: ljudi, oni nam se smiju. Po prilici bi se tako moglo opisati slično objašnjenja. Evo, kad smo već spomenuli Davida Icka, danas je jako popularno lijepiti etiketu teorija urote na nešto. Mislite li da je vaša knjiga Korporatizam, koja je pisana na jedan logičan I znanstven način sa argumentima I čak pomalo nalik udžbeniku, da spada u takozvane teorije urota I što uopće teorije urota jesu? Govori li one istinu ili ne govore? Je li ovo što vi radite teorija urote? Zbog čega uopće taj pojam postoji? Kakav je vaš stav o tome?
Okay, yeah, the book I tried to make where everything in the book relies on something you can see, okay? Or as close as possible you can get to that. No theories in the book, so everything I write about, somebody can see happening in the world. So they can see it's provable to their experience. Now, as far as conspiracy, if you want to understand the world, you have to understand it according to conspiracy. What does that mean? There's a secret, very dark, destructive, and evil group behind everything. And we're talking behind medicine, behind media, behind sports, behind governments, behind war, behind revolution, behind sickness, and so forth. Until you understand that secret dark group exists, you will not understand the world. You will come up with crazy explanations for how the world can be the way it is. Like we were talking about last time, people, instead of saying, oh, Hitler came to power because he was secretly put there by corporatists, which is verifiable, you can verify this in many different ways. No, instead people will say, oh, he just kind of got there because he got lucky in the German led the country up in 4 years to superpower status. The standard view of history is full of contradictions, absurdities, and madness, really. But if you simply put in the thesis that there's a secret group behind things, a secret evil group behind things, everything about history seems to make sense all of a sudden. Why we have poverty everywhere, why we have these wars that are the same, they mimic each other from era to era.
Povijest je dosta važan predmet u našem obrazovanju I kada se čita konvencionalna povijest, a kada ju se gleda iz pozicije podataka koje vi prezentirate, zapravo se čini da najveći I najvažniji dio potpuno nedostaje. Smatrate li da iza povijesti kakve u školi općenito nekih stvari koje se uče tijekom obrazovanja osnovnog, srednjeg, isto se krije određeni korporatizam?
If you go study what is happening today in schools, what is being taught about the Iraq war in schools today, you will see that they are telling fabrications. So to answer your question, if they can't even if the corporatists are controlling what's told to children in history, about the contemporary history, how am I supposed to believe what happened 2,000 years ago about Rome? Or even, just about the Vietnam War in the late 1960s, early 70s. History is unverifiable. If I ask anybody to verify any of this stuff that we are told is truth in school, it can't be. So the whole thing is largely made up.
Kada pričamo o korporatistima, bilo bi zanimljivo reći nekoliko riječi o njihovim načinima, sredstvima i taktikama kojima se služi.
They use the same methods worldwide. Brainwashing. Teach someone that the false is real and the real is false. Destroy true religion. And what they have is this junk religion that exists. America, people believe that Christianity is about how much faith you have. And then you have St. Paul in the Bible who is about experiencing God, not just believing in God. So the Bible emulates, so they destroy religion and replace it with some garbage. They're doing the same thing to Buddhism and Hinduism now as well. Contamination of people, through the skies, the air, the food, your consciousness is contaminated. Make people do the opposite of what they would like to be doing. Consider a war. Somebody, a young man or woman, at the prime years of their life, being taken out of all these fun times they can have with friends, going to school, doing whatever they need to do. Instead, they go over to this horrific environment where they're either going to be killed, or somebody will attempt to kill them, or they're supposed to kill other children. Why do the same patterns happen over and over and over? Taxes, trade, controlling the money supply, controlling the resources that people need to survive. Saying that, getting rid of, saying there's just one resource that can control the world, oil, and then pretending like no other competing resources like hemp exist. They used to say firewood, the kings way back in the day used to say that firewood was the only resource there is, and they used it to control the civilization. And it seems so funny now that they would say that that's the only resource there was, because now we know that's so untrue, but people believed it.
Napisali ste da korporatizam uključuje skriveni terorizam. Možete li nam objasniti tu izjavu?
Yeah, when you see somebody like President Obama on television, there's a huge group behind him that is responsible for mass death, war, killing children in Pakistan, and so forth. Now, if North Korea does that, on American news they'll say he's a terrorist. But if American government instigates that happening, they'll say it's patriotic. So what they're saying is terrorism for other people is patriotic for them. So actually, what is terrorism is what they're doing.
Koja bi bila uloga think tankova i lobista u korporatizmu? Naime, jednakom logikom kao i o svim drugim temama pisali ste o pitanju radili kongresmeni ili predstavnici vlada za ljude ili ne, i rekli ste da se ljudi trebaju samo zapitati od njihovog radnog vremena koliko vremena potroše na brigu za pitanja društva, a koliko zapravo na razgovore sa različitim lobistima, i da će se odgovor sam nametnuti. Znači, lobisti i think tankovi su tu prisutni praktički cijelo vrijeme. Koja je zapravo njihova uloga? Oni se često puta čine kao nekakve skupine mislilaca koje eto nešto predlažu, ali čini se da su važniji od toga.
A little while ago we mentioned how the most important thing to understand is there is this secret group behind things, and if you understand they exist, you can make sense out of the world finally. Now, how do we know that they exist? What is a lobbyist? A lobbyist is an ultra-wealthy organization who's given money from corporatists, and they give it, in America, they give it to politicians to pass certain types of policy and so forth. Well, what is the point? Who controls things if that's going on? People know lobbyists are all over the place. It's almost funny that they don't understand that their votes mean nothing. Okay, what they say means nothing. Corporatists control what the government does through these bribers, which are lobbyists, who they give money and say, go tell the congressperson to do this, and they'll hand the congressperson money and they'll create the legislation. Think tanks are often the most powerful think tanks. There's think tanks all over, but the most powerful ones that work for the corporatists will create the policy that the lobbyists will pay the politician to have put in place. And the policy is always more the same. Let's ban homeschooling and make sure all the children go to school more than they already do, away from their families. Let's have more war. Let's make the organic food industry not pure food anymore. Let's fill it with chemicals and say it's perfectly pure and organic.
Najkontroverznija strana korporatizma jest ona koja se tiče kontaminacije čovječanstva, koju ste predstavili u jednom od poglavlja. Ljudima je doista teško povjerovati da netko namjerno truje čovječanstvo, mada svakodnevno u hrani ima raznih sastojaka od natrija, glutamanata, aspartama, GMO i slično, međutim sve se to smatra nekakvom žrtvom tehnološkog napretka, trkom za profitom, pa su to slučajne posljedice. No, Pod kemijskim trovanjem čovječanstva namjernim spominjate 3 stvari. Cijepiva, chemtrailove i morgelone. Pa nešto od toga je više poznato, nešto manje. Krenemo po redu. Na temelju čega smatrate da je zaista posredi da se zaista događa namjerno trovanje čovječanstva i s kojim ciljem?
All of our food in America in the grocery store has dangerous chemicals. Why not some good chemicals and maybe some bad ones? Why are they all dangerous? That's very peculiar. Okay, vaccines, unbelievable chemicals that are found. Why would you give lead to your baby? Would you inject it in them so their digestive system doesn't even have a chance to excrete it out? Because lead and mercury are both similarly dangerous heavy metals to an infant. Why worldwide is a vaccine loaded? There's so much mercury in a vaccine that according to American legal standards, if you drop it on the floor, it becomes hazardous. Special teams have to come in because the mercury content becomes a toxic hazard. But if you don't drop it on the floor, if the nurse doesn't do that and instead injects it into the baby, it's called medicine. How can this be? There's formaldehyde, aspartame, there's pieces of fetal tissue in vaccines. Why is all this stuff there? And why do almost no nurses and doctors in America know that they are? If you ask them what's in a vaccine, they'll say the antibodies to prevent the disease arising from in the person. Okay, are those even there? I don't even know if they are, because whooping cough in America is an epidemic right now. Now, America also in most places has children and people immunized for whooping cough over the herd immunity rate. That means that there's not supposed to be an epidemic in the group that is vaccinated over the herd immunity rate. It's supposed to be impossible that an epidemic will arise. Oh, okay, if that's true, then why is there an epidemic of whooping cough among children in basically almost every state in America? Okay, I actually emailed the doctor who's behind the whooping cough vaccine in the University of Florida, and I emailed him a very nice email. I said, how can your vaccine work? Is it when you give it to people, the epidemic gets worse? His response to me was one of the most ridiculous and insane things I've ever read. He said, because people's immune systems often can't handle it. And I didn't even respond to him, but the response would have been, wait a minute, the vaccine is supposed to provide the immunity. So vaccines are one of the most mysterious things. And it shows how easy it is for this group, corporatism, this much control to contaminate people, to do whatever they want. If people actually take their children in America, their little, beautiful, sweet baby, just a couple hours old, and allow somebody to stick an unknown substance into them. And now this entity behind it, the medical system, is the same medical system they're told about on television, creates all these drugs with incredible side effects, death, every kind of side effect you can imagine, and they just smile as their children is shot up with this medication, now with this poison. Now, what's interesting is if you go and study the history of vaccines, you will find that all these diseases were much, much greater in their, how much they were around in the past, in the 1800s, early 1900s, and so forth. And then they started to go down around 1900. And then it was decades later that the vaccine was introduced. And now the average doctor in America will say, oh, well, the vaccines got rid of the disease. And my answer to that is, how can that be the case? Well, there's a chart right in my book that shows, whooping cough, for example. The disease was going down, and then in the 1950s, the vaccine was introduced. And then after it was introduced, it went up again before it kept going down. Scarlet fever, there's never been a vaccine for it. It was prevalent in the way the other diseases were, started to go down exactly the same way, and like the other ones today is almost zero. Okay, this is absolute proof that vaccines are not doing anything, except they may be even increasing the diseases in some cases. In my book, I document how there was a Rutgers University professor who discovered in the 1950s that the American military was spraying Florida with whooping cough. Right at the same time, a whooping cough epidemic nationwide in America, a little blip of an epidemic happened. So, and this was in a news source, which was somewhat trustworthy then, which was put out of business by the USA Today, years later. So the whole thing about vaccines is one of the most obvious, but least understood aspects of conspiracy and contamination of people. It's so obvious that we're being contaminated. If you have a level of mercury added to vaccines in England, and the same level of mercury is added to vaccines in America, autism goes up exactly the same rate as we discussed last time in those two countries. You reduce it, it goes down exactly the same. In places that don't have vaccines, there's no autism. The Amish, which is a very more rustic, even primitive group in America, huge population of people in America, they don't vaccinate. Well, the government's now trying to force them to in America, but they don't vaccinate. There was a study done of 10,000 children, Amish children, in America. 3 had autism. All 3 were adopted in. All 3 came from places where there was an extremely pollutive coal industry nearby, which has mercury in it, which can cause autism. This is absolute proof that autism is caused by mercury in vaccines. What was the FDA's response to that test? It's junk. We need to focus our attention on actual science. And then the FDA goes and makes it legal for RFID chips, which cause cancer, to be put in people.
Drugim riječima, prema vašoj knjizi cjepiva zapravo nisu iskorijenila niti smanjila učestalost nijedne bolesti.
No, they haven't. If you ask someone, just go ask someone what diseases have been eradicated by vaccines, almost everybody will say smallpox or polio. Now, and you'll ask them, how do you know that? And they'll say, oh, somebody told me. I heard it on TV or something. But if you actually go and look in books on the history of these, it becomes quite apparent that polio, as I said last time, was never eradicated. It was never that big of an issue, okay? It was on its way out, as the other diseases were. So at the time, it was not a very big issue. And instead, people changed the definition of it, which made it look like there was less polio. Now, smallpox, what appeared to eradicate that was people were kept in isolation from each other. It's called ring vaccination. And that's a great way to get rid of a disease.
Međutim, to nije toliko tajni podatak. U svojoj knjizi ste prenijeli grafikon koji to zorno pokazuje. Taj grafikon je zapravo dostupan, međutim, na neki način nije poznat.
The information from that graph is from the World Health Organization. This information is known, there is no secret. People just aren't looking for it. They trust the medical system. Okay? There's diseases everywhere, but they somehow think that the medical system is successful, so they just trust the vaccines.
Spominjete brojke koje su zapravo užasne, da jedno dijete od 160,000 danas ima autizam. Također koriste izraz nacifikacija medicine. Što pod time mislite?
Yeah, this is an amazing topic. If you study the American medical systems that they use, the procedures, their habits, and so forth, you find that they are actually indistinguishable from what we're told the Nazi concentration camp was like. For example, there's no curing of anything. Okay? And then the Nazis didn't have any cures for anything. They created problems. Well, that's what American medicine does as well. If you have cancer, I radiate you, and the cancer gets worse. My next-door neighbor had prostate cancer for 4 years. The doctors gave him 6 weeks to live. His wife said, we're not doing any medical treatments. What we're going to do is we're going to use supplements and vitamins and good nutrition. He had no rise in his prostate cancer level in 4 years after being given just a few weeks to live. And then out of foolishness, he stopped that program and ate a lot of meat all of a sudden, and he had just a small uptick in his prostate cancer level, and his wife panicked, gave him radiation treatment. 3 weeks later, he was dead after living perfectly for 4 years.
Tu također treba spomenuti i flor, koji je zapravo danas vrlo prisutan i u vodi, koliko sam shvatio, u Americi. Međutim, kakva je to tvar i čemu ona služi?
Yeah, fluoride is something that is in about 80% of water in America. It was introduced in the Nazi concentration camps. It was a sedative and a toxin that made people, it attacks the brain system, and it makes people apathetic and lazy and so forth. They use it in prisons, and you can reduce the numbers of fights in prisons and so forth. If you put so much water in there's so much fluoride in the water in a prison, the level of fights will go down. Put a little more in a predictable way, the fights go down more. Put enough in, there's no fights at all. Now, this same substance, it comes from the nuclear waste industry. Fluoride does. It's been put into American water, and we're told the reason is because it fights osteoporosis. It helps children with their tooth decay. So my question is, how come America has one of the highest rates of osteoporosis in the world if fluoride gives us strong bones and healthy teeth? Why do children have an epidemic of tooth decay in America if fluoride helps their teeth? And what we're told is, well, I mean, sometimes people will say, oh, the bottled water is what's responsible for the tooth decay. But half the bottled water has fluoride in it as well. So it's a very confusing issue, but it's clear that this is a poisonous substance which comes from nuclear waste, nuclear arms industry, which people ingest.
Dakle, još uvijek govorimo o korporatizmu, malo smo se više zadržali na tom jednom području namjernog trovanja stanovništva, kako ste ga opisali u knjizi. Osim cjepiva istaknuli ste chemtrailove. To je jedna pojava koja je s jedne strane najtajanstvenija, mada je u isto vrijeme najvidljivija. Eto, ja osobno imam pun fotoaparat chemtrailova, zato jer kad god je vedro, s lakoćom ih se snima iznad Zagreba, iznad Samobora, iznad Pule, iznad Rijeke, iznad Osijeka. Jednostavno, oni su stalno prisutni. Međutim, ipak za one kojima je to možda još strani pojam ili koji nisu dovoljno često gledali prema nebu. Možda ste vi dobra osoba da objasnite što su to chemtrailovi. Za početak, kako se razlikuju od klasičnih tragova aviona i kakve su teorije vezane uz njih.
Okay, so this is one of the most mysterious issues of all. And a lot of people that study conspiracy theory in America need to be a little more careful on their details because it's hard to find out exactly what's going on. It used to be denied by universities, government, and so forth, that there was any spraying of any kind going on. Now, in recent years, they're starting to say, okay, we do spray, we do it to monitor the weather and various things. And I remember I said earlier that there was spraying of whooping cough admitted by the United States Army in the 1950s. So the spraying has been going on. Now, we can see this with our eyes happening. What you need to do is start watching for these. You'll see long trails behind a plane that don't evaporate. Now, what's supposed to happen, what's called a contrail, is behind a plane, it has a vapor trail, which is supposed to evaporate over, a few seconds or maybe a minute or so. Now, when they sit there for an hour in the sky, you know that there's something in addition to just the jet fuel waste products that is present in the air. And sometimes it's so dense it'll produce a shadow, more dense than a cloud. That's obvious proof that there's something much more than standard waste materials in that exhaust from a plane. Now, the question is what's there. Well, one more thing I should say is that often the trails will have what I call an end cap, a cutoff point. You'll see the trail halfway across the sky, and then right in the middle of the sky it'll end, and the plane keeps going. And my question is, did the plane shut off its engine? It doesn't make any sense that the trail would abruptly change such a huge degree.
Ima li nekakve, može li se objašnjenje naći u postotku vlage u zraku i temperature?
Yeah, people have tried to say, when they go to a different altitude, the air changes texture and so forth. But we can see this happening apparently in planes which are not changing altitude. And the cutoff will be much too abrupt. It's not usually the different levels of air are horizontal. Okay, so a plane traveling this way would have to have a difference in the air, but they'd have to go in a vertical direction to enter different air pockets and so forth to create a radically different kind of vapor trail where it has this cap where it immediately ends. So it seems the best theory is that there's something in addition to the jet fuel being sprayed. It's very difficult. You have to be very scientific about this and very careful to know what you're saying so you don't want to put people into a panic or something. But it does seem to be, for the reasons I've given and more reasons that we could give, there's something strange going on here.
Ta se pojava zapravo vidi po cijelom svijetu. To su ti uzorci koji su nekad mrežasti, nekada se križaju, nekada su jako dramatični. Ponekad je čak moguće promatrati te tragove koji stoje više sati, a dok kraj njih lete avion koji ima sasvim normalni trag, pa je čak moguće usporediti. No, chemtrailovi su nešto za što smo mogli čuti, a što više možemo ih i vrlo često doista vidjeti iza naših glava. Najtajanstvenija i najčudnija priča koju predstavljate u knjizi vezano uz kemijsko trovanje organizma jest pojava zvana morgeloni. Morgelons na engleskom. Što bi bili ti morgeloni i jesu li oni kroz istraživanje određenih liječničkih udruga, struktura, sveučilišta zapravo prošli onaj korak iz mita u stvarnost? I što su uopće morgeloni za početak?
Okay, morgellons or morgellons, however you want to pronounce it, appears to be a tiny worm-like machine that operates in ways that are amazing. It's a supernatural technology. Now, when I first started reading about this, I really wanted to be sure that this thing was real because it's such a revealing issue. And yes, universities such as Oklahoma State, Stanford, MIT, universities all over are studying this phenomenon. So it is real. To know exactly what it does, you have to go and listen to the testimonies of the victims of it. And they will tell you stories about this infestation, this disease, which are absolutely amazing. For example, the disease not only can interact with your consciousness, but can take it over. Now, your consciousness, this is a very important issue, because your consciousness is a supernatural entity. I know most people want to say, no, it's just part of your brain. Well, if that was true, then why can't you show me, get a brain encephalogram and show me where it is in your brain? And most people will say, oh, it's where these neurons are firing. And I'll say, no, that's not consciousness, that's neurons. Show me where love is. Show me where a thought is in there. You can't do it. Our best evidence appears to be the case that consciousness is supernatural and beyond matter. It's somehow different from the brain. It's just coupled with your brain in some way. Now, how can there be a technology that interacts with a supernatural entity? The only answer I think that we can come to for that is if the technology was created by a very advanced source. That's why, some people like David Icke have said there's almost a supernatural, evil, dark group at the top of that, the top of all the corporatist structures in the world. Well, this is almost evidence for that because we see a supernatural technology popping up, which we have absolutely no explanation for.
Možete li nam opisati morgelone? Što je to? Kako izgleda? Vidjeli se pod mikroskopom? Kakvi su simptomi? Što radi ljudima? Kako da se to uopće pred očima?
They look like a wad of thread. And what they do to people is torture people, okay? That's a big theme in corporatism is technologies are created to torture. War is a form of torture. Schooling can be a form of torture. When you take somebody out of their natural environment and give them pain, that's roughly the definition of torture. So that's what Morgellons does. And it will replace parts of your body. Parts of your bone in your knee will be replaced in their proper positioning by this other material. Your hair will be replaced by it. So it operates, it's like it has a hive behavior where the little fibers, the little threads move on their own. They've got self-motion, which was Aristotle's definition for what is life. They operate together. They know when your consciousness is feeling a certain way. If you're going to try to pick some of them out, okay, they'll know before you start. When you're thinking about it, the fibers will start attacking you over here, give you a sensation of burning or a sensation, some kind of pain here or a pain down here. And then when you decide to change your mind and not pick some of the fibers out, it goes away. This is one of the most unbelievable topics, virtually ignored by mass media in America. But this really kind of shows what our world is about because this is so advanced. It kind of shows who and what is behind things, what they're doing. They're just having fun with their torture victims.
Je li reč o nekoj vrsti nanotehnologije I kako izgleda pod mikroskopom?
Some people have tried to present evidence that it is possibly a nanotechnology robot. That it's possible that we'll find out it is just some ultra-advanced type of human technology. That could happen. At the moment, I'm not going that direction because when you look at it under a microscope, it doesn't have proper moving parts in the way a normal machine does. It appears to be operating on some other kind of force. When we think of a machine, the car has different parts. The parts interact with each other to make the car go. It's not a machine in that sense of the word at all. So it's a completely different kind of technology than our machine world and our nut and bolt technologies we humans today are used to.
Drugim riječima, preporučit ćemo svakom da si sam proba potražiti odgovor, jer priča o morgelonima doista zahtijeva naprezanje mašte, mada danas već, ako sam dobro shvatio, čak 60,000 ljudi se prijavilo centru koji se bavi samo oboljelima od te čudne bolesti morgeloni za koju zapravo nismo čuli, jer nikad u medijima I nije zapravo bila spomenuta. U vašem zadnjem poglavlju knjige Korporatizam počeli smo od ekonomije, novca, svega ono što uobičajeno znamo da korporacije jesu, reklame I slično, oblikovanje mišljenja. Dolazimo do velikih logora koji se grade po Americi. To je vrlo neobično, koliko meni poznato u Europi ih nema. Međutim, kakvi su to logori koji se u Americi grade, čemu oni služe, koliko ljudi trebaju primiti, što se za njih priča da jesu I kako ih povezujete s korporatizmom?
Nobody knows exactly why they're built.
Koliko ih je?
oh, there's enough to house millions of people. And this is not hidden. This is announced in financial news. Some company just got a big government contract to build, they put it nicely, detention centers, okay, which is just a big concentration camp. Now, we were told before Hurricane Katrina, when the Bush administration really ramped up, they've been built for decades, but the Bush administration really ramped up how many were built. And we were told by them that this is because there could be an influx of illegal aliens, people from Mexico. They call them illegal aliens in America, strange term. Or there could be a disaster, for example, where people would be displaced and we'd need the camps. Problem, Hurricane Katrina happened, they weren't used. Okay, new ones were constructed, okay, and the ones that were right around the area weren't used. In Seattle, when there was the huge protest in 1999 in Seattle, people were put into these American citizens. So what we're told they're used for have not been what they're used for so far.
Veliko je pitanje i u kojoj mjeri su potrebni logori. Spomenuli ste da je svaki logor za 5000 ljudi, da se grade od 2000. ubrzano i da prema vašim procenama u njemu mogu stati fantastične brojke. Spominjate 150 milijuna ljudi. Očito ilegalnih useljenika iz Meksika nema ni približno toliko. Jesu li te brojke vaše točno ili su na temelju čega ste ih dobili?
If you take, there were many news stories, for example, in the early 2000s, which would say the Bush administration has built a mobile detention center which can house 2,000 people. And they've built dozens of these. And then so you add up the numbers. And then you find another news story where they were building another kind of camp, and then they say they built 50 of them. You add those numbers up. Then you have another news story where they built a huge center in, say, Alaska, which can hold 1 million people. And then you add those numbers. You keep adding it up, and you get to numbers that are in the tens of millions.
Koje je vaše mišljenje? Čemu bi trebali ti logori služiti, recimo, u planu korporatista? Vidjeli smo da je to novac je sredstvo vladavine, mediji, programiranje mišljenja, pa čak i trovanje stanovništva, kontaminacija kroz hranu, kroz lijekove, kroz cjepiva, kroz nekakve čudne pojave kao što su chemtrailovi i morgeloni. Na kraju imamo sad tu i te silne logore koji se zapravo čak i vide na satelitskim snimkama vrlo dobro. Oni su svakako činjenica. No, kakvu ulogu oni imaju u tom planu, koliko se može rekonstruirati?
Nobody really knows. Conspiracy theorists in America are desperately trying to find out. In my book, what I do is I just try to find out what's the best explanation for why they're there. And a lot of what we do is look to the past. Because these camps have shown up in the mega empires and over, Stalin, Hitler, here in this region of the world, they were recently used. This is a phenomenon that repeats. Let's set up camps where we separate the families out and then hurt people in various ways in the camps. This exists as far as history goes. So as far as who's going to end up in them is not quite clear, but it does seem, if we follow history and some other things that I spell out in the last chapter of Korporatism, it looks like we'll find out, but apparently some group of American citizens, are they going to be for Jews again, like they were in Germany? Is it going to be for Muslim people? Is it just going to be for,
American people?
Yeah, just a white guy like myself. I mean, what's it going to be exactly for? And it appears to be some group like that. But it really doesn't matter. They're there. It's not announced properly in the mass media because they'll say, a detention center in case there's such and such immigration activity. No, this is a government who's purposely destroying its own economy, starting wars through lies, channeling in all the money into them, building camps which are empty, waiting to be filled. There's something really sinister here, and the average American doesn't even know.
Čini se da je taj korporatizam uzeo maha u zadnje vrijeme, nekako se intenzivirale su se te pojave. Hoću reći, prije 30, 40, 50, 100 godina čini mi se da chemtrailovi logori u takvim mjerama nisu bili prisutni niti cijepljenja. Nešto se zbiva posebno ili je to eto tako logična posljedica tisućljeća razvoja?
Well, there has been corporatism for as far back as we can see, but it fluctuates. And usually it fluctuates in ways where it destroys itself, and then out of the destruction, a new system is born. World War II was a good example of when corporatism destroyed itself, and then out of it, the CIA, the United Nations, the Pentagon in the United States, all these things came out of it. So,
zapravo je taj korporatizam uništio ljude, a ne sam sebe.
Yeah, its primary goal, such as World War II again, is let's see how much of a war theater we can have. I mean, how can you get all these people in there fighting against each other? When I look back at World War II footage, I have to think something possessed these people. They were out of their minds to do this. And they hardly even have reasons. The reasons they were given are fabricated. And even if they were real, it wasn't enough to do all that. So it's amazing that people can be tricked into acting in these ways. And yes, there is a ramp up in corporatism. So we can, based on the past, usually the ramp up happens and then there's some kind of cataclysm, some sort. So it does seem, based on the past, that something like that is coming. I don't know exactly what the cataclysm will be, or if there even will be one, but it's something we have to look out for to understand these patterns through history.
U knjizi se ne bavite rješenjima kako se izvući iz korporatizma kojem smo zapravo svi izloženi i kroz reklame, i kroz televizije, i kroz dućane, i kroz zapravo skoro svaki aspekt života u toliko mjeri da ne primjećujemo korporatizam nalik ribi koja ne primjećuje vodu u kojoj pliva. No, vidim da na majici imate Indijanca, dobro, iz Amerike ste pa kauboji Indijanci su uobičajena pojava tamo. No, ti Indijanci zapravo imaju neke veze s onim kako bi ljudi mogli se oduprijeti korporatizmu. Na koji način? I da li to nužno uključuje netehnološki svijet?
Okay, what the American Indians did is, as we said in the last show, bought and sold from each other. They didn't have someone who's not involved in the labor and creating the item taking a profit. So we directly sell and buy and sell products that we actually need. When this happens, an incredible thing happens to people. They have amazing amounts of leisure time. There's a myth that, the life of the primitives is so hard and the glorious life is civilization. All you need to do is go study primitives and civilization. You'll see that people working hard and doing what they don't want to do is the civilized group. Primitives, as Henry David Thoreau wrote in his book Walden, they've got all kinds of leisure time. Their families are often very strong. They often have radically reduced crime, as we were saying earlier. So that has to be the answer. I mean, we can't fight the corporatists. They will just blow us out with a neutron bomb or something. They've got more weaponry than even Americans. There's so many gun owners. They still have so much more weaponry. The only thing you can do is find ways to exclude them from having any power. And the only way to do that is ignore their money, ignore their existence, and focus on each other. And that's exactly what the Native Americans did. That's why they were their lifestyle was obliterated. And no, it doesn't have to. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want to go live like American Indians because I don't want to live in a hogan and have to grow my own food." It doesn't have to do with technology. The American Indians had enormous technology. They could create weather. They knew if they started a huge fire in this part of a field, that the next day there would be a huge rainstorm because the smoke creates big rainstorms. So that's high technology. It's weather control technology. So it doesn't have to do with technology. It has to do with who's buying and selling from each other. Now, there's a type of corporatism in the book that I call anarchistic corporatism, where people in factories have actually thrown out the CEO, the board, the leaders, and they with force, they said, we're going to control the corporation by ourselves, and it worked. And it's found that we don't need the CEO. They just take all the money. They kept all the money for themselves. The factory ran much better. Products were better, and everybody made all kinds of money.
Opisali se zapravo da je prava priroda čovjeka da radi malo, da bude puno s obitelji, da raspravlja o filozofiju živa u prirodi. To je potpuno suprotno današnjem korporativnom stilu života, ali eto, nekako sam to zapamtio, čini mi se da nije toliko neizvedivo.
This is the way people are supposed to live. This is what's natural. This is what makes us happy. It's what many people deep down, if they really search their feelings, know that they want. They want leisure. They want depth. They want to feel something powerful. They want to feel strong love between not just their family, but people. That's people all around. This is what makes us really feel like we're human. When you're in this vibe, you think to yourself, this is the way it's supposed to be. This is what I'm meant for. Our brains we have a pineal gland in our brain which delivers DMT. There's something called a sexual orgasm. These are euphoria. These are intoxication and love. Our physiology is made for this. Our minds are made for this, for happiness and joy and together, family, spirituality, and profundity. But yet this is exactly the thing that is absent in the corporatist society.
Jeffrey, hvala. Do neke sljedeće prilike kada ćemo nastaviti ovaj razgovor, vas pozdravljam. Bila je ovo dakle priča o korporatizmu, to je nevidljiva matrica u kojoj smo svi više manje uvučeni, što ona hoće, kuda smjera, pa to su pitanja već za $1.000.000. Za početak dovoljno je zapravo zapitate se jesu li svijet oko nas i događaj kako su nam prezentirani doista onakvi kakvi se predstavljaju. Ostalo će valjda doći samo po sebi. Laku noć.